want to introduce our speaker this morning. Charlie Chase is a longtime colleague of mine from SAS. I think we spent about 15 years or so overlapping there before I retired. And Charlie, I don't know what he was thinking. He's still working there. I'm trying to convince him of the joys of retirement. He's currently executive industry consultant and trusted advisor for the SAS Retail Consumer Goods Global Practice. He's author of the books Next Generation Demand Management and Demand-Driven Forecasting, and co-author of Bricks Matter, The Role of Supply Chains in Building Market-Driven Differentiation. Charlie has published over 50 articles in business journals on demand forecasting, planning, supply chain management, and market response modeling, and was a longtime columnist for the Journal of Business Forecasting. In 2013, he received the Institute of Business Forecasting's Lifetime Achievement Award. Charlie's latest book is Consumption-Based Forecasting and Planning, Predicting Changing Demand Patterns in the New Digital Economy. Charlie.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if I can live up to that. Who was that guy? Jeez. All right, today I'm going to start out slow, but then I'm going to slowly ramp it up. And it's going to get furious like the car movie at the end, okay? Because I have a lot to say, and they only gave me an hour, and I told them it takes me 20 minutes just to introduce myself. So, in fact, I had a fight to get this hour. It was amazing. The other day I had 20 minutes and I got past the first slide and I was done. It's like, okay. Anyway, I'm just kidding. Today we're going to talk about accelerating insights and predicting consumer demand patterns, the art of the possible. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about a few new things that are pretty cool, I think. And as Mike said, I just couldn't retire. I still have that fire in my belly when it comes to forecasting. I wear my passion on my sleeve, as my friends tell me, and I love what I do. So until that goes away, I'm going to keep doing it and have fun. Okay. The nice thing is, as you get older, you can have more fun. There's not as much pressure on you because you can say, "All right, I'm retired. I had nothing." Okay. All right. So let's talk about the last 3 years quickly. So due to the digital economy, unforeseen disruptions. Wow. Key word: unforeseen disruptions. Those disruptions were already occurring before the pandemic, because of the digital economy. I come from the consumer goods industry, so my customers are like Nestle and Kellogg and Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and Conagra Foods and Hanes Brand. So I'm going to talk to you in terms of those types of companies. How many people here are in the consumer goods industry? Perfect. You're going to love this then. Okay. How many of you are in retail? Okay, you'll like it. And how many of you are practitioners? You actually create a forecast. Okay, that's good. Okay. All right. So as you know, those of you who create forecasts, there's a lot of challenges even before the pandemic. One of them is that it's very complex, particularly in the consumer goods industry. So they're always launching new products all the time on shelf. Retailers are now saying, well, if you want to launch another product, which one do you want me to get removed from the shelf because the shelf's not big enough anymore? Okay. So we're already dealing with that, what we call SKU proliferation. We also know that the process is riddled with bias, human error, waste, and inefficiencies. You don't experience any of those, do you, forecasters? Okay. Does anyone know what the number one forecasting technology is today in 2023? Excel. That's embarrassing. Okay. Do you know what the number one model is used today in 2023? And I'm going to show you why in a few minutes. Average. That's even more embarrassing.
Average.
A moving average. A moving average? That's ridiculous. I was using econometric models back in 1994 right out of college, university. We were using neural network models at Coca-Cola in the late 90s. That's insane. Okay, so the other thing is this unforeseen disruption woke us up because how many of you report into operations planning if you're a forecasting math planner? Okay, I feel sorry for you. That's okay. Just kidding. You're too far removed from the consumer. So when the consumer shifted their demand patterns, when we went to lockdown, what happened? They were looking at transaction shipments going into the channel. They didn't see the point of sale data or the syndicated scanner data, and they didn't see those shifting demand patterns until 6 to 8 weeks later. It was already too late. They couldn't react to it. So I was reported into sales and marketing. So I had access to the point of sale data, to the syndicated scanner data. I had access to all the marketing activities, and I was building all that information into the models And then I was linking it, I'm going to show you that today, how we can link consumption to shipments, to transactions, using two models, which is really cool. Okay. And the other thing, the biggest thing here that I want to mention is that if you go on the right here, my right, that's your right, right, okay? There's a disconnect between customers and consumers and the people who are actually doing the forecasting. So there's a disconnect between marketing and supply chain. And all the demand planners report upstream in supply chain. They don't even use the same data. Okay. So what happened is we had empty shelves as a result of this situation. So what did we learn? So there always has to be a key learning. So the key learning from all this over the last 3 years is companies need to forecast not from supply to consumer, but from consumer to supply. All the companies today, particularly consumer goods companies, are forecasting what they call demand. It's not really demand, it's shipments going in, that's supply. So then they go to orders. They say, okay, I'm going to look at sales orders coming from my retail customers. That's replenishment. True demand is what goes through the cash register. So if you're Kellogg, when you sell a box of cereal, you ship it in to that retailer, they sell it, and then they scan it, and that gets captured in a database. That's called point of sale data. They get that point of sale data from their top 20 accounts or customers on a daily basis, but marketing gets it, not operations planning. And then they also buy data from a company called Nielsen or RI who takes all that point of sale data, cleans it up, and then goes into the stores and tells you all the causal activities that are going on, in-store merchandising, displays, features and display, pricing, temporary price reductions. All those are causal factors in a model. And we can run simulations around that. And I don't even need machine learning to do that. I can use an Aramax model or a multiple linear regression model. I prefer an Aramax model because I don't have to introduce a trend variable or a seasonal variable. Now you can cheat. You can run a winners model and then take the seasonal indices and use those as your seasonal variable in a multiple linear regression model. That's something we used to do before we were using ARIMA models. Okay, I wanted to throw that in there so you know that I can come down to your level as a data scientist. Now I'm going to take it up to an executive because executives don't understand what I just said. Nor should they, because I'm the person who should understand it. But it's my job to explain it to them in terms that they can understand so they get it. So a lot of times we talk to executives as a data scientist, and we just blow their mind. And they're like, who is this person? So I'm going to try to take you back up and down that scale. Okay, so we all know the bullwhip effects. Does anybody here not know what the bullwhip effect is? Okay, so you know that when a consumer buys it, the retailer will then add a little bit to it, and then when it gets to the wholesaler, they add a little bit more, and then by the time it gets to the manufacturer and supplier, it's blown totally out of proportion. The point I wanted to make here is if you look at the consumer side, it's very flat. Do you know that the consumer demand is easier to forecast than the shipments, the supply, the transactions going in, because there's no bullwhip effect associated with it. That was the point I wanted to make here with this slide. Okay. So why are you focusing so much on shipment supply transactions? In fact, I'm working with a company now that makes automobile aftermarket products like oil filters, air filters. They don't even look at shipments. They only look at sales orders and point of sale data. And they cut an order based on those forecasts. They don't even forecast shipments. What a novel idea that is. Do you understand the term when I say shipments, everyone? Okay, all right. If you don't, please stop me. I'll explain it to you. Okay, all right. So here's why a moving average is the number one model right now for all corporations globally. Okay, they have these big transactional systems, and each of these transactional systems have a demand forecasting and planning module. Those modules were designed 10 to 15 years ago for a more stable economy without unforeseen disruptions. Okay, so not only have we experienced the pandemic, but now we have what? Inflation, we have fluctuations in oil prices, we have a geopolitical situation in Europe. All these things are disruptions. They're going to continue. The world is going to be full of disruptions from now on. It's not going to stop. Okay. There's always going to be something. And in the consumer goods industry, the biggest disruption is what? Sales promotions. There are companies that have their products on promotion 90% of the year. Some product is being promoted. And they've trained us to buy from promotion to promotion. How many of you really buy anything at a full price? I don't. Okay. So here's how I teach modeling to an executive. I say all models are simply about two factors: understanding the patterns, and then whatever's left over is randomness or unexplained. Okay. So our goal is to understand and model all the patterns in the data and minimize the randomness. So if I'm using a model that can only model trend and seasonality, what happens? Hopefully this works. I use a whole lot of gut feel and judgment to explain away the unexplained because I can only explain trend and seasonality. There's more than trend and seasonality going on in the marketplace. There's price, there's in-store merchandising, there's competitive activities, there's promotions, there's unforeseen disruptions. All this stuff is impacting demand, and it's disrupting the trend and seasonality. So you can't rely on these trends and seasonality anymore because it's being disrupted by all these unforeseen disruptions. Okay. So 90% of those technology platforms can only model trend and seasonality. So this is what happens. So let's look at a data set. Okay. So here's a real data set. By the way, all the data and output I'm showing you today is real. I had to mask it to protect the innocent. Okay. That was another forecasting joke. It just went. All right. So let's look at this. We go from left to right. We have seasonality and an unsupported promotion. Okay, that's what it means. Then we have an event that one of their customers, a retailer, decided to do inside their store chain. Then we have seasonality. Then we think, and I stress think, we have an outlier here. That may not be an outlier. That might be a result of an unforeseen disruption. And then we have another more seasonality, and then we have a supported promotion. So what's a supported promotion? Or heavy up promotion? Advertising, not just on national TV, but now on social media platforms. We have in-store merchandising. We have all kinds of activities going on, and look how well it did. Wow, it just blew out the house, that promotion, right? And then we have seasonality to decide, let's run that promotion again in the future. So what happens if I have a system that can only look at trend and seasonality? I have to cleanse the data into base and promoted. So what do? As a demand planner, I spend 80% of my time doing this. I cleanse out all the spikes in the data, okay, and I have to figure out manually how to correct for the outlier. I can't do that. I need to use an optimization model to correct for that outlier. And then they call that promoted volume. And they give that to sales and marketing, and they say, here, tell us give us a forecast for the promotions. Well, when a sales and marketing person sees that big spike, it has seasonality in it. They don't know that. They think that whole spike is the promotion volume. And this is why they over-project the promotions. So you need a model that can de-seasonalize the data, de-trend the data, and then calculate the promotion above the seasonality. You can't do that with a exponential smoothing model or a winners model. Can't do that. Okay? And that's what these systems, these big transactional systems, they only can do that. And they can't correct for outliers automatically. So then what's left over? What's left over after I cleanse out all these spikes? This is what's left over. What is that? It's a moving average. That's the base volume. So if you're cleansing your data into base and promoted, I'm saying to you, why are you doing that? So you know what I did? I went to a customer this was about 5 years ago, and I said to them, your data is very seasonal. Why is it picking a moving average? And they told me what they're doing. We're cleansing the data. When I was a director of forecast, we never cleansed the data. Okay. Even if it had an outlier in it, we would put in a dummy variable to correct for the outlier. Okay. Or an event variable. So anyway, I said, well, don't cleanse the data. Run it through your transactional system. And guess what it did? It picked Winter's exponential smoothing every single time, 85% of the time. And improved their accuracy between 5 and 10%. So I said, you waste all this time breaking in base and promoted, when all you had to do was just run it through and you would have improved your accuracy. This is a classic situation where the technology is driving the process instead of enabling the process. Because they lack the advanced sophistication of modeling, they're telling you to break it into base and promote it. And you know what's funny? Over time, the demand planners say, I only want to be measured on the moving average part, the base. I don't want to be measured on the promotion volume. Well, I would too, because I can knock that out of the park. I don't even need a model. I could do that in Excel. And that's why they're using Excel. Because they get it. So what they do is they manually blend it back together, and this is what it looks like. So what you need is something that does more than just trended seasonality. You need to be able to bring in events, calendar events, holiday events. You need to bring in the point of sale data, the Nielsen and IRI syndicated data, because it has causal information around in-store merchandising, price, feature, displays, the number of stores. And then you want to be able to bring in external events. We have a customer that in the middle of the pandemic, we were using epidemiological data as one of the causal variables in Google Trends and the point of sale data, and they were modeling their portfolio at a 92% accuracy on average across the board weekly by SKU in the middle of the shutdown. Think outside the box. What is causing this disruption? Is there data associated with this disruption that I can bring into the model? Okay. And guess what? We have automatic outlier detection today. Another company, they said to us, we don't know where we're in the promotion. So I said, okay, we're going to lower the confidence limit and raise the number of automatic outliers that we can detect in the data. And we ran the model, and it came out with like 20 positive outliers. I went back to the marketing group, and I said, so we found an outlier here. And I go, yeah, we ran a promotion there, we ran a promotion there, we ran a promotion there. And I said, okay, what was this promotion, this one, and this one? We took those outliers and we created event variables around them. And then we said, when are you going to run those again? Oh, we're going to run this one here, but last time we ran it in week 22, 23, and 24. Now we're going to run it in 36, 37, 38. And I said, that's okay, we can move it there. How many of you do this as a man planner at your company? I was always one. Okay. All right. So you need to have all these capabilities available, and now we can layer on top of that machine learning. One of the most common machine learning models that we use, at least at SAS, something called a stacked neural network model plus time series model. So we're using a deep a neural network model, and then we're combining it with different time series models like Winters or ARIMA, and it does it automatically. And it has outlier detection, automatic outlier detection. Okay. So if we look at this, if we take this to the next level, here's that same data. Okay, what we want to do, and the first thing we want to do, and this is something else that a lot of these older transactional systems can't do, is they can't do in-sample, out-of-sample model performance. They can only do fitted models, so it fits into the data only. So you want to, that's not really a good way to determine what model to choose, because some models will fit well to the data, but not forecast well, and vice versa. So what you want to do is you want to train a model on some of the data, and then you want to forecast out, and you want to be able to run a competition too. So the first thing is you train the model on this portion of the data, and then you run multiple models, you bring in all these causal factors, okay? And then you try to see which model has the lowest MAPE or whatever other performance metric. Today, does anybody know what the two most prevalent performance metrics is for forecasting, according to Gartner? So this is a third party. Our company wasn't involved. They did this. Okay.
I don't know, MAPE and bias.
MAPE and bias. Close. Okay. Ready for this, Mike? FEA, forecast value add. Weighted MAPE, then bias. Those are the top three. Okay, according to Gartner. So let me say it again. Forecast value add. How many of you are doing forecast value add? If you haven't, read Mike's book. Okay. His book is awesome about forecast value add. Okay. Today we can do forecast value add automatically. You don't have to do it in an Excel spreadsheet. You can just we have systems that do it automatically. And then you have weighted MAPE. I was using weighted MAPE, and I wrote the first article, I think, maybe, or at least one of the first articles back in the early 90s on weighted mean absolute percentage error. We were using it back in 1994. Okay. And then bias. Now, bias for years wasn't being used at all, but since the pandemic and prior to the pandemic, because of all this unforeseen activities, there seemed to be a lot more bias than usual. So now a lot of companies are moving back to bias. All this literature was done by third-party research, like companies like Gartner. So we didn't do this research, so it's not bias. You can find it. out on the internet, hopefully. All right, so once we train the model, we find the model that does the best. So in this case, it's this ARIMA model at the bottom and it has the lowest MAPE. And then you go back and put the add sample data back in the model, reforecast, and this is what your forecast looks like. So don't you think this forecast looks more accurate than the one I just showed you, where they broke it down and based and promoted? I think so. Yeah. And all I did to get there is point it to the data and push a button. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go past this. I wanted to just illustrate something here. A lot of people think that you have to hit that solid line, the forecast. If you don't hit the line on that line, the accuracy, then you didn't do your job. That's not true. Okay. If you're a demand planner, if you're within the upper and lower range with a 95% confidence level, if your forecast falls in that range, in the blue area or the gray area, grayish blue area, then you did your job. You don't have to hit the line. Okay. Why is that? Because we use the upper and lower range as one of the calculations in the safety stock. So look at this model. Look how tight that upper and lower range is. Now it gets, and of course, as you go out further, it expands. That's natural because you don't, And this is weekly data. All the data I'm showing today is weekly. Companies are moving away from monthly data to weekly data because promotions run weekly, not monthly. So you can't capture the promotional effects using monthly data. It gets washed out in the data when you aggregate it. And you can't capture all those other unforeseen disruptions either because they also happen on a weekly basis. And some companies are now moving to a 30-day daily forecast. Okay. So let me see, if I was using a traditional transactional system, that would have been the forecast. And look at that range. So imagine if I was using that upper and lower range to calculate safety stock, I would be building like 3 extra warehouses. And that's what's been happening. Okay. I just threw that in too today. I just found that I wanted to. Also, hierarchical forecasting. Companies are moving to hierarchical forecasting instead of forecasting one at a time. You can forecast in a hierarchy, and instead of doing just bottom up and top down, we can now do middle out. Okay. So what we want to, and we can run models, different models at every level of the hierarchy. Not just one category models, we can run all the categories. So you might have a winner's model at the top level, you may have an ARIMA model for product 1, and product 2 may have an error max model, the pack size may have a neural network plus time series model, a regression model. All these models are now available and automated in these new, what I call them Generation 2 expert systems, because now they're using machine learning in these systems. Okay. And we can say, at level 3, at the pack size, that model will override all the models below it, so disaggregate it down the hierarchy. So here's a key, though, in the disaggregation. If I disaggregate it using a static disaggregation routine, it's not going to be very accurate as I go out into the future. Does that make sense? In other words, if I use a split 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, because you know what happens? This is what's happening. This is the middle level, and the 2 child SKUs underneath it are, one's growing and one's declining. So you always have to do a bottom-up forecast, and then use the bottom-up forecast to disaggregate the middle down. So what's happening is, in the first week it's going to be 60-40, in the second week it's going to be what? 62-38, the split, because it's floating, it's dynamic. If you don't have a dynamic floating disaggregation routine, then the low-level mix won't be accurate over time. And that's where the biggest benefit is, the mix, not the higher level. Everyone calculates their accuracy monthly at the aggregate level. Not good. You should be capturing it weekly at the SKU, at the distribution point. So I go to companies and I say, what's your accuracy? Oh, we're like about 60, 65%. So at what level? Monthly at the total. So let's drill down weekly to the SKU distribution point, and guess what their accuracy is? About 25 to 35% accurate. Because they're not focused on it. And demand planners have so many SKUs and so many customers, they're doing mass aggregations. They just can't do it in an Excel spreadsheet anymore. So they have no time to go deep into the hierarchy where the real benefits are. So we have something now I'm going to show you in a few minutes called assisted demand planning, where we can provide demand planners with a machine learning digital assistant that will guide them up and down the hierarchy. But before we do that, we want to go into short-term demand sensing. So before we go into this, I want to make sure everybody understands it. So true demand for a consumer packages company or a retailer and many other companies is not their transaction shipments. It is consumption, which is point of sale data or syndicated scanner data. Okay. Yep. And shipments is a supply signal. That's the transactions. And sales orders is a replenishment signal. Okay. That's very important to understand. So let's see what we're going to do. We're going to do something called consumption-based modeling. My current book talks about this in detail. And I'm not trying to push my book. Okay. Mike, you're supposed to do that. All right. Anyway, so we're going to model the point of sale and syndicated scanner data, which is true consumer demand. We're going to run simulations around it. And then we're going to take the history and the final forecast for that and use that as a leading indicator in a transactional model, shipment model. Okay, so let's do this. So here's the data. But there's just one little problem. Well, wait a minute. We don't have problems, right? We only have challenges and opportunities. So the challenge I have here is that there's a shift, a time shift. So the retailer buys the volume for the promotion a week or two early before they run the promotion. So if you look really close at this data, you'll see there's like a 1 week lag between the dotted line and the solid line. The solid line is supply, and the dotted line is demand. So if I run a regression just against that, the R squared is 60. Okay. So you say, okay, well, it's explaining 60% of the variation of demand. Well, as I add more causal variables to it, it goes away. It goes down. Okay, the significance of the point of sale data. So first thing the marketing people will say to you is, well, hey, there's no correlation between consumption and transactions. Well, there is, but there's two things you have to do first. First, you have to scale the graph. They don't know what scaling is. Simple thing like scaling the graph. The first time a marketing person showed me consumption and shipments, one line was going like this and the other line was flat. And they said, "Steve, there's no correlation, Charlie." And I said, well, one's in cases and one's in units. So did you ever hear about scaling the graph? Because you'll have them all on the right-hand side. And you went, what's that? So I scaled the graph, and this is what showed up. And I went, whoa, they're definitely correlated. Wow, I didn't know that. I said, no kidding. Simple stuff. You don't need to show them these gigantic algorithms because they're not there yet. They just invented the wheel. They're still trying to figure out. And then what cracks me up is that they're riding around in a chariot, and they say, I want machine learning. I want a rocket ship. I said, well, you haven't even gotten to a car yet. How are you going to drive a rocket ship? You're still... Okay. So let's model. We're going to model the dotted line first. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull it forward 1 week. So it's a positive shift, not a negative shift. So it's a forward lag. Okay. And when you do that run a regression, look at the R squared. Now it's 8.87. Interesting. Little stuff like this no one picks up on. And they don't realize what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Okay. So we're going to model it. Here's the first model, Aramex model. And we just modeled consumption. So if you look at this, it already picked up 2 outliers automatically and corrected for them. I didn't have to break it down in base and promote it. It said, hey, 2 outliers. I found them for you, and I corrected the historical data. You don't have to do anything. And then it said, oh, by the way, I calculated seasonality. There was no trend in the model, but there was some seasonality. I corrected it. I did a seasonality differencing. And then I picked up all these causal factors. In fact, it ran a transfer function on the holiday promotion for me because it ran across 3 weeks. And it said, here's the cumulative effects over the 3 weeks. So in week number 1, you sold 20, and by the way, the coefficient is the lift. So the parameter estimate is the lift. So if I go to holiday promotion, where it says scale, the first week you sold 2,600 cases, and then in the second week, 2,400 cases, and the third week, only 500 cases. No one does that around promotions. And then you had these other promotions, and then in a category, you're actually driving the category because you're the leader in the category. And By the way, when you run a display and feature combined together in the store, in the same store in the same week, you get another lift on top of that of almost 61 cases. So now, just think of me, if I was reporting to the vice president of marketing and I showed him or her this, they're going to say, wow, you are like so cool, Charlie. It's like, you are not a forecaster, you're more than a forecaster. If I showed this model to the vice president of supply chain, he'd be going, okay, I don't really care. I only care about how much I got to ship in. Because that's what I get measured on. I could care less about this. And by the way, if I look at my holdout sample, my accuracy, my error is about 87% at the weekly level, and this is like three or four levels deep in the hierarchy, weekly. Okay. So now I can run some simulations around this, but I'm not gonna. So there's the outlier, there's the promotion lifts, okay, and I already captured the trend. There is no trend, I'm sorry. Not enough trend anyway to pick up, but there was seasonality in the data. Picked up the seasonality. So here's my final forecast for consumption. So I'm only halfway done. So I said, okay, I know what consumption is. So now I'm going to take the history of consumption and the forecast that I just created, and I'm going to use that as a leading indicator in a shipment model, transactional model. Here's the output. Another Ermax model. I'm not even using machine learning yet. I mean, this is basic stuff. Okay. So again, here's the key though with this one. Again, it picked up the outlier. Said, hey, there's an outlier in your transactional data. Got that, fixed it for you. You don't have to break it down and place and promoted. Everything's cool. And in this model, there is a trend, and there's also seasonality. Picked up a trade promotion lift. 29 additional cases are going through the channel. But here's the key metric. Excuse me. That's my consumption, the term demand. What does that coefficient tell me? Anybody know? Okay. This is where marketing bows down to me and kings me at this point. Vice President of Marketing. For every 10 cases you sell into the channel, every 10 cases you ship into that channel, 7 get consumed by the consumer and 3 go into inventory. That's what that's saying. So guess what? You're loading up the channel with inventory. You need to put more emphasis on promotions and consumption and less on trade promotions. So that trade promo, I would stop doing it for a while until you blow out that inventory. Now I'm like cooler than cool now. Vice President of Marketing has just made me Chief of Staff and put my office next to his or hers. And whenever somebody says, what's the forecast, I go see Charlie. Wow, you're quiet. Did I? Yeah. Okay. So here's my final shipment forecast. Not bad, huh? And what's what was my, in my holdout sample so I'm forecasting at a 90% accuracy level. Shipments. How many of you can do that today? At the SKU level. Weekly. Okay. Real data. Oh, I forgot. Today there's a lot of talk about, well, Charlie, I need to know what's driving the forecast. Well, if I'm using a simple model that only can predict trend and seasonality, I can only tell them, well, seasonality and trend, and by the way, it got disrupted by all these disruptions. So it's no longer valid. Now I can use the models I just created and said, put it into a waterfall chart, and I can break it down into base and promoted now because I'm using the model to do it, not judgment. So I'm taking those coefficients from the models and using that to break out the promotion volume. Okay, and I'm using in-store merchandising activities to break out additional, and I can say this much is driving base, price is having this much impact, promotions, seasonality. So now I'm like, I went from hero to legend overnight. This guy's a legend, man. You should see what he just showed us. And by the way, I just saved the demand planners 50% of their time messing around with data in a spreadsheet. Okay. I don't know what happened here all of a sudden. So it's all about three things. We need to balance automation, explainability, and accuracy. Sometimes I have to use a lesser model to explain it and lose some accuracy, which I don't mind if I'm already at a high accuracy. Or I can say, no, I'm going to use a model that focuses strictly on accuracy, not explainability, because that's more important to me. And I can automate it. Okay. So this is the dilemma that you're in. Today, the automation part we can do, but do you want more accuracy or explainability? Okay.
Hey, Charlie, does that balance point change based on where you are in the hierarchy? If you're at an SKU level, do you go all in on accuracy so you get those disag proportions correct? And if I got to explain it to someone else, I'm way up here.
Yes, great point. So we normally do this at an aggregate level, like at the product group or brand level. But we can do it at the SKU level, but there's a lot of noise there. It's a little bit harder to do. Okay, but we can. It depends on the company and the data, how good the data is. But this is usually, we normally do this at an aggregate level. It's about halfway down in the hierarchy. It's about 3 or 4 levels deep. It's around brand or product group level or pack size level, depending on what kind of company you are. So am I making a lot of sense so far? Because I see a lot of people just sort of like, or did I like, wow, there's no way I can do this. But you can, okay? The technology has now finally caught up with the analytics. The analytics is 100 years old, or more than that. Anybody know when multiple linear regression was invented? 1886 by Galton. Pearson actually proved it out with the heights of children. Okay, and then when was the first econometric model run? In 1918 by, I think it was Sir Henry Moore out of the UK, somebody like that. Okay. If you want to do forecasting, you have to be a historian. Okay. I love history. That's why I love forecasting. History always repeats itself. Not exactly, but it does. And you can argue about it all day long, but it does. Okay? It's repeating itself right now in Europe. Okay? All right. So, let's move forward. Now I'm going to really mess everything up. Everything that you learned about artificial intelligence, you're going to say, oh man. I talk to executives and they say, Charlie, all I hear about is AI. AI this, AI that. What is this all about? And I said, look, let's simplify it. Let's flip the letters and let's call it IA, Intelligent Automation. The whole idea of AI is to automate the mundane, repetitive, non-value work that we do, and then provide you with faster, more accurate insights so you can make faster, smarter decisions. So it's really about intelligent automation. What is an example of intelligent automation? Automatic outlier detection. It's that simple. Okay? You need to break it down when you talk to an executive in simple terms that they understand. You don't go in there with an algorithm this long and say, this is what's happening. They're going to throw you out of the room. They're going to say, who is that person? Okay. All right. Intelligent automation. So if we use the example of intelligent automation moving forward, then this is what we can do. First of all, I wanted to give you some new information. This came out only a couple weeks ago, a McKinsey article. They said to supply chain leaders, where would you use machine learning and AI? And they all said, first of all, 80% of them said they plan on using it, will use it. And they said the first place we will use it is demand planning. And then sales and operations planning, control tower, detailed scheduling, and inventory optimization, in that order. Okay. So look out, if you're in demand planning, it's coming. Okay. Yep. All right, so I just wanted to throw it in there. Is that helpful? Okay. You can go out on the internet, there's a whole article there on this, it just came out recently. Yes?
Do you think it's a better application for demand planning or demand sensing in the very short term, where you can very quickly analyze it for demand planning? If I'm doing 3 months out, I don't care about it.
Yeah, I put a ringer in the audience, so I told them to ask this question. Okay. I'm going to answer it in like 2 minutes. Okay. Awesome question. All right. So, demand sensing, the next slide. See, that's why I'm a forecaster. I forecasted that. Okay. All right. So short-term, since the pandemic, a lot of these companies said we need to go to short-term demand sensing, a 1 to 8 to 12-week forecast, okay, and not a rolling 24 monthly forecast. And one of the things we found is you could take these weekly models and actually expand them out to a 52-week rolling forecast, and are actually more accurate than a monthly 18-month rolling forecast. Interesting. So demand sensing. Now, I've defined demand sensing three ways. There's short-term demand sensing, medium-term demand sensing. So the model, the ARIMA models I just showed you, that's medium-term demand sensing. Now we're going to go to short-term demand sensing. All we're going to do is introduce machine learning. We're still going to introduce point-of-sale data, inventory, and any other promotional data in the models. We're going to do it in a two-step process, but now we're only going to forecast out 8 to 12 weeks. Okay. And here's the data. So this is, I believe the bottom line is the point-of-sale data. And you see it's a little flat because we didn't scale the graph. We didn't have time. At the time, the customer didn't, I'm sorry. And then you have, it would have been a little more choppier. And then order quantities, which is the replenishment orders, sales orders, and then inventory. So these are the three causal variables that we're going to use in the model. Okay. All right. So the whole idea is we automated the data, we validated the data, we have this new modeling technique that we're going to use called a stacked neural network model plus time series model. It's an ensemble model approach, but you could use gradient boosting, you could use other ensemble models, or random forest, or RNN model, and then we're going to it's going to auto-tune itself because we're going to optimize it. So let's go into it. So we're going to this is sort of how the model looks. We're going to use the neural network to forecast the time series model. Will take the residuals and forecast those. And we're going to forecast by product, by ship to customer location, by week SKU. So we're going to take this one step further. We're going to say we want to forecast by SKU, by ship to our DC, and then to the customer DC location. So this is as granular as you could get weekly. And we're going to, and here's the data. We're going to use order history, shipment history as a target variable, future orders, and confirmed orders. And this time we're using Nielsen and syndicated scan data, again, not point of sale data. And we're going to compare it to the legacy statistical forecast model that's in the transactional system. That's the base forecast, okay? And then we're going to compare it to the demand planner's overrides. So we're going to run a competition. We're going to say, okay, we're only allowed to point our technology at the data, our algorithms, I should say, and push a button. We're not allowed to touch it. Okay. But the demand planners can go at it and do their thing. And then we want to compare it to your raw statistical engine forecast, and let's see who wins. Okay. So here's the results. Let's look on the left side. Left side, the gray line is the machine learning model that we used. The blue line is the base forecast model that came out of their legacy system. And then the orange line is the demand planner's base plus expert opinion. And this was like 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, okay, that we did this. So if you look at it, the gray line was much more stable, not as much bias. There was a whole bunch of bias, even by their statistical model in period number 5. And they were always lower than they were biased on the low side. Okay, it looks like. So if you go to the right side, the machine learning model improved the accuracy anywhere between 4.4 and 14%. Okay, so let's take it a step further. And here's the model over the 8 weeks. So the machine learning model was really accurate for the first 4 weeks, and then it started to drift a little bit on the upside from a bias perspective, but it never went above 5%. They were always below 10%, and in period number 5, they were like over 20% bias on the downside. So when they went into the pandemic, this particular company, the shelf didn't go empty for the products. Okay, because we were linking it to the point of sale data. That was what was driving the forecast. They didn't have the point of sale data in their forecast. Okay. And if you look at the volatility, if you go all the way to the right, the enhanced machine learning model had the lowest volatility, and the model was much more stable over time. This is real data. Okay. So this is short-term demand sensing using machine learning. And not a real deep learning model either. It's just a neural network model plus time series. And we've been using neural networks since the late 90s. What did we learn? We also learned that this time shift between the point of sale data and the transactional data, it changes depending on the products. So if it's a high volume product, they reorder it almost every 2 to 3 days. So there is no lag, no shift. They fall on top of each other. But if it's a slow moving product on the long tail of your products, they tend to order those less frequently, and there's a longer shift. It was somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks. Okay. So that was one of the key learnings we found about the relationship between consumption and the transactions. Okay. Does this make sense? For those of you who are familiar with this? Okay. So we took that model down to a 30-day daily forecast. Now, this company didn't do daily forecasting. This was just a fun thing. They said, hey, Charlie, can you guys do a daily? He said, sure, you have daily data, so we'll do a daily forecast. And we'll use a naive model. So we'll compare it to a naive model, really, which wasn't fair. I mean, a naive model, Anyway, it was 76% accurate on a daily basis. So here's the final accuracy. So the accuracy at the weekly level on average was around 81%, week to week by SKU by ship to point. And the daily forecast was around 74% rounded up, 73.8. So you see, I'm a data scientist because I didn't say 74%. On here I said 73.8. Okay, that's important. You got a 0.8. If you have 0.81, that's okay. But if you have 0.8123455, that's not good. That's not cool. Okay. To an executive, you're only allowed 2 digits. Okay. And I cut it down to 1. They were like, "Oh, good, Charlie, 73.8. I got it. Good. It was really like 70.8123, something like that. I don't know. Okay. Another joke. Well, I know it's morning, but is it that bad? Did you guys stay out late last night or something?
I think the comedian last night wowed them. And
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I can't compete against a comedian. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's take, just to prove that this wasn't a fluke. So here's an executive's philosophy. Charlie, you got the accuracy right 1 period. So it's like, okay, you got lucky. If you get it right the second time in a row, now you have my attention, but I'm not sold. If you show it to me the 3rd time in a row, now I'm going to give you my credit card and you can go buy whatever you want. Okay? So that's the rule with an executive. The 3-point rule. Okay, so here's another company. This company was in Europe. They sold direct-to-consumer food products, pasta products. They were seeing 50% declines, 200% increases as people went into lockdown. This was in the first phase of the pandemic. So we said, well, we got to find different data. We can't use your trend and seasonality, doesn't work. We do have your point of sale data. We'll put that in there. We'll look and see what happens. If Google Trends does something in your categories, guess what they did? And it was free. How cool is that? Free data. I like that. And then there was we used epidemiological data, and then we used local econometric data from their local Federal Reserve banks, okay, in that area. So as we added another causal factor to the model, it improved. And finally, we were able to improve their accuracy by 12.3%, and on average, their accuracy was 91.7% across their product portfolio weekly by SKU in the middle of the lockdown. So I just wanted to show you this because it's not a fluke. You can do it. Think outside the box. What's causing the disruption? Is there data associated with the disruption? Do I have the modeling capability to model that data? And if I do, then I'm good. Okay. And I can tell you more and more examples from my experiences over time. Okay, but I'm running out of time. They also had there was a free dashboard that they had access to, so we were able to connect them to that and built another dashboard for the demand planner so they can run simulations. What if the pandemic extends what if they extend the lockdown? How will that impact demand? Okay. All right. Summary, I don't think I need to summarize this. I think I told you everything you need to know. And if you want these slides, just let me know. So here's something totally new. Something called assisted demand planning. We're going to try to boost demand planner's forecast value add. Okay. How many of you use forecast value add or heard of it? A couple. Okay. It's predominantly in the consumer goods industry right now and retail, but it's expanding out to other countries. And like I said, read Mike's book, and he tells you how to do forecast value. But I'm going to give you a quick overview. So what is forecast value add? We want to measure every touch point in the process before and after a demand planner makes an adjustment to the forecast. How many of you make manual adjustments to your forecast? Okay. Stop doing that. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, we want to see if they're adding value or not adding value. So if they make the forecast less accurate, that's a non-value add touch point. If they make the forecast more accurate, that's a value add touch point. Did I get that right, Mike? Okay, I'm just checking. So 2 benefits from that. It increases forecast accuracy because what are you doing? You're eliminating the bad touch points that are not adding value. And it improves the overall efficiency of the forecast. So you can get it done in less time. Okay? So that's forecast value add. Any questions on that? Pretty good. And you can go deeper. And here's an example. I took this out of Mike's book. Oh, it's okay, Mike. So I think it's in your book. Anyway, you can see this particular demand planner, whenever they touch it, they actually improve the accuracy. Okay. But if you look at the consensus forecast does, but the final proof forecast, not so good. Okay. I'm going to have to move fast here because there's not another session, I think, until 11:10? So if you want to stay around, I can talk some more. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do? We're going to automate the historical data. We did that. We're going to automate the forecast engine. Did that. So now I've automated. I'm using IA, intelligent automation. Automated accessing the data. I don't have to cleanse it anymore. I have a machine learning capability that will build the models for me. However, I can go in and tweak the models if I'm a data scientist because it can't. And by the way, an algorithm cannot forecast every single product accurately. We found that about 85% of your products can be forecasted using advanced modeling. There's always this 15% where a model doesn't make sense, and that's where the demand planner should be focused, on the exceptions. So our philosophy is touch the forecast on an exception basis, let the system, the technology do all the heavy lifting. So in order to do that, you have to trust the forecast. So if you don't, the reason why the companies touch the forecast so much is they don't trust it because you're using simple modeling techniques, trend and seasonality, and that isn't going to get the job done in the new digital economy with all these unforeseen disruptions. So you have to bring a lot of causal data into the model. Okay. So now here's the key now. We don't want to replace the demand planners. Okay. I'm going to repeat it. We do not want to replace the demand planners. We want to make them what? Smarter. So they can make faster, more value-add decisions when they touch the forecast. That is our primary goal here. Okay, so here are 7 demand planners. These are real demand planners. I changed their names to protect the innocent. Okay, so this is not their real names, but the data is real. So we go left to right. So you have Mary, Jay, and Sam. Whenever they touch the forecast, they make it more accurate, anywhere between 13 to 16%. Okay, David, Madison, and Mike, same thing. They make it more accurate between 3 and 10%. But John, when he touches the forecast, it makes it worse. Now, I'm not firing John. Okay, so don't even think about that. John has the worst products in the company to forecast. Okay, new products with no history. Okay, products with intermittent demand, sparse demand, with a whole bunch of zeros in it. In fact, one of the products he has to forecast, they only sell 5 units a year, and it's a little washer worth 10 cents. And it connects to a front loader or an agricultural machine, and without that washer, it won't go up and down. But they only sell 5 a year, and they only cost 10 cents. So why would I run a model against that? Anyway, this company's saying, how come you guys can't forecast those 5 units? I said, because we're not. Because it's a futile situation. You do economic order quantity. So you make 5, you sell 3, you make another 5. They only cost 10 cents. So why even try to forecast them? But this is the thing, So anyway, that's John's challenge, right? No problems, only challenges and opportunities. So we have an opportunity to help John and make him smarter. And that's what we want to do. We also want to help Madison and Mike. No relation to you, Mike. Another joke. Why did they go? Okay. So what our objective is identify forecast areas where we want to make overrides, and then provide the demand planners with direction and range. We want to tell them what ones to touch, whether to raise it or lower it, and stay within a range. So we're going to use machine learning models to do this. We call it a digital assistant. It's going to follow their adjustments over time and learn. And as it learns, it's going to start making recommendations. And in this case, we ran a competition. So what we want to do, instead of touching all those products, we only want to touch a few products. Okay. So here's what the machine learning tells them over time. The machine learning says, in week number 1, you have to raise the forecast, but stay within the yellow brackets in that range. And by the way, here's a recommendation, the red line. And in week number 2, don't touch it at all because the statistical forecast has always outperformed your overrides. So don't touch it. Don't touch week number 3. Week number 4, you don't really need to touch it. You're pretty close. Week number 5, you need to lower the forecast when you touch it and stay within this range. So do you get the picture here, what's going on? Does this make sense? Okay. So we ran a competition. We used neural networks, gradient boosting, random forests, and the neural network seemed to win the most. So that's what we went with. And here's the results. Let's go over on the left. So on the left, it took them 47% less time to get their job done every cycle. And where they didn't touch the forecast, because the analytics was more accurate, on average it was 86% accurate at the weekly level, not at the monthly level. And the demand planners their accuracy was around 59%, and it improved it to 65%. But this is the first pass. We did this with another company and improved it even further. So, what were the final results for all our demand planners? So our goal was to help, John and Madison and Mike? Well, we helped all of them. How did we help them? We didn't improve the touch points for Mary, Jay, and Sam, but we improved the time it took them to get their job done. It took them anywhere between 25 and 55% less time. So instead of taking 3 weeks to do the job, they got it done in 5 days. Okay. If it takes 3 weeks for you to get through your forecasting process, there's a problem. It should only take 3 to 5 days every month. In fact, when I was running a department, we were doing a lot of this stuff. Not this, but all the other stuff I showed you. And the CFO came to me and said, so Charlie, what do your folks do after the first week of the month? I said, we play cards, we put our feet up, we have a party every once in a while. I bring in, training. Last week we did watercolors. It was really a lot of fun. You went, what? I said, no. We do other analysis for everyone in the company because we're all data scientists. My demand planners were also data scientists. I hired right out of the graduate schools, MBAs in econometric modeling and engineering, and I trained them. I found that I can train somebody in the business in 30 days. It takes 6 months to a year to train somebody on the analytics. So what did I do? I said, okay, I have a friend who's a consultant. We're going to create a sheet. Every time somebody asks us for analysis, I want you to write in the sheet the type of analysis, what their outcome was, and did they value it. Okay. So we did that for 6 months, and then I gave that sheet to my friend, and I said, tell me what the cost would have been. So then I went to the CFO and said, here's what we do for the other 3 weeks of the month, and we just saved you $950,000 over the last 6 months. Think outside the box. Challenge them. They like to be challenged, executives. We don't challenge them. We're afraid of them. I'm not. Okay? Because I know the analytics will be better than anything they can come up with. Okay. True stories. So anyway, we helped everybody. Look at John. Now he's only a negative 1% instead of negative 7%. So he's doing better. Okay. All right. And here's the final results. This is just a screenshot. We actually, they had a system where they could do it either using a cloud-native user interface, or with a couple of clicks you could drop it down into an Excel interface, do all the same things, and then upload it back. So it was just using the interface. But anyway, you can see what the machine learning was doing. It was showing them, you raise it in these 3 weeks, here's the range, and here's the recommended forecast. So overall, we were able to improve across several companies the demand planner's value add anywhere between 6.3 and 9.6%. So you say to yourself, that's not a lot, Charlie. Well, this one company told us for every 1% you increase the forecast accuracy, we can lower safety inventory safety stock by 2%. So it's a 2-to-1 relationship. And this company happened to, their overall annual revenue or turnover was like $96 billion. So do the math. That's millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. They were able to shave 1.2 days of inventory globally across their organization. That's what they want to hear. They want to hear the benefits. What does this do, Charlie, for me? What can I say? How can I make more money? Okay. That's what you have. You have to hit those buttons, not just show them an algorithm and say, "I'm a data scientist. I'm really cool. I know how to write an algorithm." I don't need to write an algorithm. Technology does it for me. Okay. So what are the key learnings today? Wow, I'm only going to be maybe a minute over, 2 minutes. There are 4 key learnings. There's a lot more. One, we need to plan from what consumer to supply, not supply to consumer. That's the biggest key learning. Traditional forecasting methods don't have the ability to model cause and effects, so I have to go to more advanced models. And also, we now have powerful technology around advanced predictive analytics and machine learning that can accelerate the insights. And finally, intelligent automation works, meaning that AI works. So flip the letters from AI to IA and make it simple for them to understand. And then they'll give you more money to do this stuff. 4 very simple key lessons learned from all this today. I can take questions. And finally, everything I talked about today is in this book. The book came out 1.5 years ago. I had nothing to do during the pandemic because I couldn't travel. So I wrote a book. But I don't have any kids, so I could do that. They weren't running into the room saying, "Dad, can you take me outside?" So, all right. So I don't know if this was good today. This is a different perspective than what you've been seeing, which is okay because this is the practitioner track, and we want to talk more from a practitioner perspective. And the other track, the research track, is very good to learn about modeling and how to use the models and some of the projects that are working in academia. When I was a director of forecasting, I had one foot in academia always. All my friends are in academia because they're building all this, they're doing all this great research, but they don't have any data. So I made a deal with them. I said, you do the research, you build the algorithms, I'll give you all the data you want. And if it proves out, then I'm going to implement it at my company. And you can get all the credit. I'll even help you write the white paper.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay. Any questions?
We've got a break now, so we can hit up Charlie. Monty, yeah.
Just one quick question. Maybe I didn't understand the recommendation algorithm. So there was like the forecast that comes out of the machine, and then there's a recommendation to increase that forecast within a certain range. Why wouldn't you just increase the forecast in the first place?
Okay, so what it does is it tracks the demand planner's adjustments over a period of time. In this case, they had the actual forecast value add metrics for 2 years. So we trained the machine learning model on the 2 years of historical data where they were touching the product, which products they were touching, whether they were raising it or lowering it. And that's how it learned from that information and then started to teach the demand planners to make the suggestions to the demand planners.
So the machine already knows what the plan is probably doing anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
So to start out, if you're not doing forecast value add or if you're doing it but you don't have the history, then you have to start out slow, and the algorithm will learn. It'll take it probably about 3 to 6 months to really become accurate over time.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is kind of in the same vein. I'm trying to understand maybe the intuition behind using demand planner's adjustment to the forecast is basically one of your features. If you have the actuals, wouldn't that be a better signal, kind of what they
Yeah, you can also look at the actuals. That's what it was doing. It was looking at the actual, what the original statistical forecast was, what the demand planner's override was, and saying, well, hey, in this case, the statistical forecast was more accurate. Why did you make the adjustment? So next time, don't do that. And then on another one, it said the statistical forecast for this product was good, but you made better. So keep doing that.
And would you, for kind of the forthcoming forecasts, would you ask the planner to continue providing their adjustments and then use that as one of them?
Absolutely. So we want the demand. See, the whole idea is today, demand planners, there's so many SKUs that they have to do it at an aggregate level. This is now telling them go deeper in the hierarchy. It's saying don't do it at the aggregate level, go down to this level and do it, because that's where there's more value. So now it's freeing them up, so they have less time. It takes them less time to do it, and they're more accurate when they make touch points on average. Yeah.
It's a little bit like just incorporating judgment in forecasting, right? Because
Yeah. And we also let them make overrides even where it said not to, if they want. Or we could freeze that cell and say you can't make an override to it. Okay. So we did open it up and let them adjust it, and it would still track them. So that was up to the company how they wanted to do it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Did you record gliding these or all
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, did we record it? Yes, you have to record it. I would.
I was thinking.
Yeah, always record everything, even the data you're using and why you use the data, and the causal factors in the models. And you should be doing post evaluation. After every cycle, you should say, what did the model say? What were the rationales around it? What were the overrides and the rationale around the overrides, so that you can determine if the overrides are actually adding value or not. I mean, that's important. Document everything. That's like absolutely, for sure.
I just wondered if you had done it.
Yeah, we've done that. I've always done that. We always had a sheet. Once the cycle was done, here are all the assumptions that went in it. Where did those assumptions come from and why? Yeah. Any other questions?
So is the idea that over time your model's learning what they would or wouldn't change, and like basically over time they would have to make less changes, less
Yes, absolutely.
changes?
That's why it reduced the time it took, and they made less changes. And when they made a change, almost always 90% of the time it improved the accuracy. So that's the whole idea. You want to condense a cycle. Today it takes like three weeks in many cases to get this cycle done. So you have 1 week to breathe, and then you're back in it all over again. It's like, wait a minute, this is crazy. It should take 3 to 5 days. The whole cycle should be done. And the next 3 weeks, you can start doing real value add analytics. If you have a team, who has some data science background, and you don't even need to be a data science. If you're just an analyst, knows a little bit about forecasting. Okay, because today the technology does all the heavy lifting for you. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Charlie.
Okay.